Today's project on our 1960 John Deere 430 two-cylinder tractor is to work on our final drive so we can get to our seal that's in this axle shaft housing. To do that, we have to remove the nut and the hub, which sits on the tapered spline of the axle shaft. I've got a pretty big socket, nice cheater bar to kind of twist some torque on that nut. If a guy was smart, he would probably do this with the tires on the tractor, which would provide friction to resist the, I guess, rotational forces that we are going to have when we try and turn it without the tires. All I'm doing now is simply spinning the hub. So, to remedy that, at least getting the nuts off, you're going to take some heat and use the principles of thermal expansion to kind of heat our nut up, loosen the grip of those threads on that shaft of the nut, and hopefully spin it off a little easier. So with that, I'll get my torch up and going. Normally I would use a rosebud tip on my torch to heat the nut. I can't seem to find it. Things walk away in the shop, so we're just going to use a standard cutting tip, but generally just heat the nut and then get it nice and hot, spin it off. Let's see how it goes. Give it one more go here. Our nut's trying to retain a little bit of color. Let's see. If she don't go this go around, what we're going to do is simply give it a little bit of time. Still nothing. Sometimes a little heating and cooling can aid us in separating what's there. It's a tough nut to turn. How much we're going to gain. Not much. Alright, give him a little time. Let him cool down, because I imagine that axle's got a little warmth to it too. Cool down, maybe heat up again, go for round 2, see what happens. In the meantime, I might jump over the other side. try the same thing. Tough nuts to crack. In this case, tough nuts to turn. Well, it was pretty obvious that I was not having enough friction to overcome the torque I was putting on the nut. So we were just spinning our final drive. So I've gone to the scrap pile, implemented this high-tech solution of wedging a plate of steel between two nuts, which will hopefully burrow into the ground and offset. And I'll tell you, I cheated a little bit. I did go ahead and start turning this one, and it did start to give a little bit. So that's what we needed. Let's see if she'll keep going. That's the wind. As we'll probably get to a point where it cools off enough where I will heat it again, especially as it comes to this outside edge where there may be some burrs where that nut's going to hit it. Try and give it another turn or two. Yeah, it's becoming more of a challenge, so we'll go back to the heat and then try and turn more from there. But we've got her broke loose, and see, our washer's free, so we are gaining. Well, our current situation is our nut is kind of bound so tight on the shaft. I think the threads on the edge have either been peened in over time and won't let the nut thread out evenly. I probably could have taken a grinder ahead of time, maybe flushed that off. Maybe that would have helped some. It's so tight on there. I mean, we get it red hot, it'll turn a little bit, but then you hear it galling almost on the inside. So what we're going to do is get a little more destructive, possibly cut the top of the nut off with the torch, maybe use a grinder, a couple different techniques just to see if we can't pop this sucker off of here. And this comes off that easy. We'll imagine how easy this hub's going to come off. Should be just as fun, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So see what we can do to get our nut off. see right here at the end, this is all goobered up.
That's really
That wasn't going to let our nut come out, so probably going to have the same issue on the other side.
Well, we could try and grind it off flush there before we start.
You can give it a shot, but even those threads are they're eating out right in. Taking our grinder and ground down just to the level of the threads on the axle shaft through the nut. So hopefully we can get enough twisting on here. We'll put a crack right through that thin spot right there and be able to break free. That one might have a salvage potential. You can see the galling. Hey there, viewers. I'm interrupting this exciting sequence of video events to provide a little retrospective opinion on what you just saw. In attempting to remove the nuts from our axles, we experienced some galling. Galling is a process that, through the forces of pressure, heat, and friction, two separate metallic entities can, in a sense, weld themselves together. It tends to happen with alloys such as stainless steel, aluminum, a little more frequently. Fine threads can be predisposed, which I consider this to be a fine thread setup. Perhaps due to the increased surface area that's there, it's more area for stuff to bind. And, you know, with enough of this action back and forth, we've created a mess, essentially, on this axle shaft for sure. Could I have avoided this? Maybe. I suppose I could have heated the nut, let it sit, come back when everything had cooled back down, see if that was enough to break the bond of corrosion or just time that was in there. Fact is, I'm just not a very patient person, and I try to use the time I do have available to get the job done that needs to get done. So yes, I made a mess of this side. That impact twisting back and forth, as you can see, it really did bugger up the threads of not only the nut, but our axle shaft as well. Knowing that we had this going on this other side, we were a little more cautious. We just tried to cut the nut off when we knew it wasn't turning. And we may be able to save this side. I'll go ahead and get a fine-tooth chisel and chip that little metal out that appears to be only in between the threads. But even so, before doing all this, I did have a backup plan. And that backup plan involved another set of final drives that, thanks to my hoarding tendencies, I've kept these off to the side. Hopefully it's going to pay off, keeping these in storage. I was able to remove these nuts and hubs cleanly about a decade or so ago. We'll clean everything up and do some disassembly, and I guess we'll have some rebuilding of finals in our future, but that's okay. The ultimate goal, again, is to pull this little flange off because there is a seal in between the axle and this flange. If we were just to clean that tractor up over there without doing any of that, you might be able to see that there's a pretty significant leak around that axle housing. And if I was to run it like that, paint it, clean it up, it would just start leaking, and I'd be very disappointed with myself for not going through all this process. So that's why we're doing it right. Do it right, do it once, and be done. And with that, we can go back to that exciting autumn afternoon where we were tearing things apart and see what other kind of progress we made. And I guess I should say that with enough pressure, friction and heat, you might experience some galling yourself. If you do, that's okay. Just use the proper tools, wear some safety glasses, and just be gentle if you got to cut your nuts the way that we had to do here. So we'll see what else we got done that day. Anyway, figured while we had the tractor out, we'd go ahead and pop the front end off, maybe the engine. Of course, with all the space we got working around here, we chose the mud hole to work over, but that was what makes it more interesting. 4 bolts hold this front bolster to the engine. I've taken the bottom one out on my side. Oh. Brother Cody over there is working on his side. You can see the gap.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, he's free over there. So it's all on me. I probably could have put a little more height in my tow motor to keep the drop from being so severe. But all we want this to do is just fall and land on our forks and not knock the rest of the tractor over, basically. I think we're pretty close to that. Not crack my block up here. Let's see. Tell you what, I'm gonna give you this wrench. I'm gonna hop up here in the tow motor and I'm gonna give that just a little bit of a lift so I don't stress that casting up there too much. Bit of preparation here. We'll be able to throw a chain around the engine, take out a couple bolts and slide them out. Important thing to remember when taking the engine off is this little shield on the bottom between the flywheel and I guess the engine itself. There's 3 on each side, 3/4 bolts that hold the engine in, but you can't get it to slide out without taking this little shield off, 2 7/16. And I'm talking wrench size. Hold that in. Alright, we're getting some separation between the bell housing and the engine. Cody's working on his last nut. I'm going to run up on the tow motor and we're going to give it a little bit of a lift. See if we got enough to cause some looseness and pop this right off here. Throw that on a pallet. Oh, this is live action right here. Haha. My last project for the night is going to be to pull this bell housing from the back end. There's just a couple nuts that hold that in, and then we're going to call it a day. I think it's a successful day. You can see in here the throwout bearing. There's a dual transmission shaft that there's one inside, one on the outside. We'll get into all that in a future date, but good day today. Front end off, engine off, nuts off. No hubs though. We'll get to that. that should wrap it up for the night. We've got our transmission final drive assembly. I'll tuck that back in the barn, get back to it at a later date. Good progress today. Front end off, engine off, bell housing off. Making progress.